Let's open in prayer before I even start. I even give my name. Well, Lord and Father, just thank you for another day. Lord and Father, we know that we can't do it without you, but we can do it together. And with you, everything is possible. We all know that. Lord and Father, I'm just so grateful for this church to sponsor and give us the place to come and just learn what we can do to better heal ourselves and to better serve the community in the whole. Lord and Father, just keep everybody safe and sound. I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, my name is Peter. I'm a firm believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with addictions. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to share my story tonight. My hope is that no matter where you are in your recovery journey, that you'll hear one thing clearly, that there is hope, and that hope is found in Jesus Christ. I'm the oldest of 3 children. My mom tried her very best to raise us, but my childhood was filled with chaos, dysfunction, fear, and abuse. Those are some of my earliest memories that I have. The holidays were often the hardest times of the year for me. Drinking was a major part of my life, well, my family's life, and home was always chaotic. And whenever my dad was drinking, we knew there was nothing good that's going to come out of it. He always came home angry and out of control. I remember one Christmas when my dad came home drunk, arguing with my mom, and then all of a sudden, all my Christmas gifts, my sister's gifts, my youngest sister's gifts, was flying out the window, out on the floor. I watched every kid in the neighborhood grab gifts, take everything that looked good and disappeared. The next day I saw kids with clothes that were probably mine, playing with toys that were definitely mine, and I really took a really deep toll on me. They never returned them. Yeah, that was really hard. Then I was around 6 years old. Because of the Christmases were so bad, I used to go around looking for the Christmas gifts so I could find out what I possibly might be able to get. And when I was doing that, I ran into my father's adult magazines. At the time, I didn't understand what I was looking at, but it introduced me to thoughts and feelings that I wasn't prepared for. I was curious, confused, and ashamed all at the same time. Around the same period, I started sneaking sips of beer from my dad whenever I could. As I got older, my dad would take a nap, and I would take his beer from refrigerators. And that started a very dangerous cycle that I didn't know where it would lead me. Looking back at it, I think that was a way for my dad. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped the part. Looking back, my dad would take me to parties, barbecues, and bars with him. I think that was his way of trying to connect with me. I still remember the first time I drank an entire beer. I like the feeling that it gave me. For a kid who lived with fear and uncertainty, it seemed to make everything just disappear for a little while. Before long, I was stealing beers out of my dad's refrigerator, drinking them in my room, and looking at my dad's adult magazines. At that age, I didn't understand what was happening inside of me. I only knew that certain things helped me escape of how I felt. Once in a while, my aunt would take us to Sunday school. We would walk several blocks to church, and she would pick us up afterward. Those those are the earliest moments of being exposed to the faith. At the time, or as time went on, things between my parents continued to get worse. My dad's drinking became more severe, and evidently my mom moved across town to an apartment complex where he worked as a maintenance guy. Life was very different on the other side of Staten Island. It's kind of weird. Staten Island was like, the south side of Staten Island was like country. And the north side of Staten Island was just like New York City. If anyone has been in New York City, you know what I'm talking about. It's very chaotic, very busy, big buildings. So that was totally new to me. I started hanging around with kids in the neighborhood and quickly found myself getting involved in things that I shouldn't be doing. I wanted to fit in, and I was willing to do almost about anything to be accepted. Around that time, a church bus from my grandfather's church would stop near their apartment building and pick us up. We started attending Sunday school there and church services. I enjoyed going to Sunday school because of the activities and the friendships that I made. But when it came time for the sermon, I honestly didn't understand not a word the man was saying. Evidently, I began sneaking out of church services and wandering around the town, finding my way back to my grandfather's house. Then one day, I found my grandfather's tobacco pipe. Since smoking was common among the adults in my life, I figured, why not? Let's try it. The first time I smoked a cigarette, I got really dizzy. But I also experienced another feeling that made me want more. I soon started sneaking cigarettes from my family members, drinking whatever I could, finding ways to hide the magazines that I was looking at, and doing whatever I wanted to do. Those behaviors became a pattern that would follow me for many, many years. Not long after that, my grandfather passed away. Even though I wasn't especially close to him spiritually, I loved spending time with him. Losing him affected me more than I realized at the time. Then a few years later, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and evidently he passed away as well. Now, I shared some of these difficult things about my father tonight, but I just want you to know this. Despite of all the hurts and all the habits that he had, I love my father very dearly. He was the cause of a lot of pain in our family, but he was still my father, and losing him left a big hole in my life. After my parents separated, my mom began seeing another gentleman, which most of you know is John, that comes here and sits with me all the time. I remember finding out before they told anybody. As a young boy, I was very angry and confused. I didn't understand what he was trying to do, but I really saw that he was trying to be a father that I didn't want, because I already lost my father. What I didn't realize then was that I was actually carrying wounds that would eventually fuel my addictions, my relationships, and many other choices that would later take part of a big part of my life. As my mom's relationship with her new boyfriend became more serious, our lives changed again. His family became a regular part of our lives, and suddenly I was spending a lot of time with his cousins and relatives who were close to my age. What I saw in the environment felt normal at the time because it was all around me. It was constantly drinking, constantly smoking, foul language, very unusual behavior that now I recognize was very unhealthy and destructive. But as a kid, I didn't know any difference. seemed to be quite everything that, it seemed to quiet everything that was inside of me. The confusion, the hurts, the anger, it all disappeared for a little while. From that moment on, I wanted more. I began finding ways to earn money so that I could buy more marijuana, I could buy more cigarettes, and even try to find someone to buy me beer. What started as a curiosity quickly became another way for me to escape reality. Around the same period of my life, I experienced sexual abuse from an elder man, and it lasted over 4 years. At the time, I didn't fully understand what was happening. I felt that my mom shouldn't have known because of the lifestyle that he lived, and my mom didn't protect me at all. I was young, confused, and didn't have anyone I felt safe talking to this about. Like many survivors, I carried a tremendous amount of shame, confusion, and insecurity. I buried it deep inside and tried to pretend that it wasn't affecting me, but the truth was, it was. Those experiences left wounds that followed me way into my adulthood. Instead of dealing with the pain, I continued doing what I had learned to do, numbing. I turned to alcohol, marijuana, cigarettes, and even sex. Evidently, my mom decided to move our family to Florida to start a new life. Looking back, I think she was hoping for a fresh start for all of us. But changing the location didn't change what was happening inside of me. When I arrived in Florida, I didn't know anybody. I wasn't allowed to go to school because I lied to the school that I was going to because I wanted to be in an older class, not with the kids that I was supposed to be with. Before long, they found out and they expelled me. Before long, I found friends who were just as reckless and as lost as I was. We got into trouble constantly. I was kicked out of school, like I said, because of my behaviors and lying. I was smoking marijuana regularly. I was living without direction, without accountability, without a real understanding of who I was. The police knew me by my first name, and they always brought me home by officers almost on a regular basis. By the time I was 17, I met a young woman named Trish. That's my first wife. We'd known each other for some time, but evidently we started dating, and before long she got pregnant with my first daughter. I believed it was the right thing to do was to marry her, so that's exactly what I did. For a while I thought becoming a husband and a father would change me. It did. 2 years later, my second daughter was born. And I wasn't even there when she gave birth. I was out using. My first wife began making changes in her life. She stopped using drugs and she started focusing on our family. I wish I could say I did the same, but instead my addiction grew worse. I became a full-fledged alcoholic, drug addict. I was using drugs regularly, making terrible decisions, in and out of jail, and went to prison also. I was selling drugs to support my habit and trying to provide for my family at the same time. I was living a double life. But on the inside, on the outside I was a husband and a father, but on the inside, I was controlled by addictions. I spent years in and out of jail, often driving offenses and making poor decisions that came from a very big part of my lifestyle. Every time I got in trouble, I promised things would be different, but they never were. Evidently, I can't say that word. Eventually she left me. Let's put it like that. She reached her limit. After years of broken promises and repeat disappointments, she divorced me. I was dismayed and devastated. At the time, I blamed everyone else. I blamed her. I blamed the courts. I even blamed my circumstances. What I didn't do was take responsibility for my own actions. Losing my marriage and watching my family fall apart should have been a really big wake-up call for me. Instead, it became another excuse to run, to use drugs and alcohol, to live the lifestyle that I was so used to. And running was something that I became very good at. After my divorce, I was angry, bitter, and broken. The last time I was in jail, all I wanted to do was see my daughters. I went to my ex-wife's house, but she sent my girls away because she knew I was getting released. I was furious. Looking back, I understand why she made that decision, but at the time, all I could see was my own pain. I said things that I deeply regretted. To this day, I still do. Things that no father should ever say to a woman, and a husband should ever say, or a man should ever say. A couple of days later, I got on a plane and moved back to New York. In my anger, I decided that I wasn't going to support my children financially at all. I worked jobs under the table whenever I could, and if child support started taking money from my paycheck, I would quit and find something else. I was very bitter. At the time, I felt it was justified. Today, I know it was wrong. Years passed. Evidently, I realized I wanted a relationship with my daughters. Problem was that I had spent many years damaging that relationship. But I knew that if I just took the effort and tried, things could possibly change. So I packed up my belongings, moved back to Florida, hoping to make things right. So I went to court seeking visitation rights. During the hearing, my ex-wife played a recording of some of the things that I said to her years earlier. You would not want to hear what I said. Sitting in a courtroom and hearing my own words shocked me. The judge told me there was no way that he would ever allow me to have unsupervised visits with my daughters. As much as it hurt, I couldn't argue with him. I had created that situation myself. I agreed to the supervised visitation because seeing my daughters mattered more than my pride. Unfortunately, the visitations rarely happened. There's always seemed to be another obstacle, another delay, other reasons things wouldn't move forward. Every disappointment fed my resentment that was already growing inside of me. Instead of dealing with my emotions in a healthy way, I went back to things I knew best. I went back to drugs, I went back to alcohol, I went back to running. For years I bounced around from town to town, state to state. Every time I got in trouble, I would leave and start over, somewhere else. I convinced myself that a new location would solve my problems. The truth was, no matter where I went, I always took myself. My addictions followed everywhere I went. My pain followed me everywhere I went. My anger followed me everywhere I went. And evidently, the consequences always caught up with me. I spent years living this way. In and out of jail, in and out of trouble, in and out of relationships. The cycles never changed because I never changed. I'm going to fast forward 15 years later, or 15 years ago today. I finally started getting tired of living that life. I was exhausted. I was trying to wake up. I was tired of waking up broke. I'm sorry. I was tired of wandering around. How was I going to eat? How was I going to? I was tired of trying to escape from my own life. I was tired of trying to escape my own life. Around that time, I started attending Celebrate Recovery meetings. I wasn't fully committed, but I knew I needed help. I also began attending the church where a Celebrate Recovery was hosted, because they had a soup kitchen attached to it also. And if I'm being honest, sometimes I went just because they had a meal. But while I was there, I started hearing people talk about this person called Jesus. Something about that interested me. I wanted to believe that there was a God. I wanted to believe there was hope. I wanted to believe my life could be different. I wasn't ready to surrender yet, but God was already beginning to work in my life. At the same time, I was trying to have one foot in recovery and one foot in addiction. We all know how that turns out. As many of you know, that doesn't work very well. Then one day something unexpected happened. I was strolling through Facebook, back when Facebook first started. I don't know if everybody remembers when you used to say, "You know this person." And the woman that I saw was very familiar. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had met this woman many years ago while I was living in New York. So I reached out to her. The woman was my wife today, Jen. We started talking and quickly reconnected. Before long, she invited me to visit her in Fort Lauderdale. I went to see her, and we immediately hit it off. Not only did we connect, but I also connected with her son, Joshua. We enjoyed spending time together. For the first time in a long time, I began to imagine a different future for myself. Evidently, we started dating. I found work, we got a place together, and life seemed to be improving. But there still was a problem. I had never truly dealt with my addiction. I learned how to hide it, I learned how to manage it, but I never surrendered it. At that point, I was what many people would call a weekend warrior. I convinced myself I only partied occasionally and that everything would be under control. The reality was that my addiction was still alive inside of me. It was only waiting for the next opportunity to take control again. Unfortunately, the opportunity was coming soon. Not long after that, my sister moved to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Jen and I were looking for a fresh start. And knowing how I like to run, we packed up and moved. We made a decision to move to South Dakota. So we packed up everything and we moved here. Looking back, I can see that I was doing what I always did. Whenever life became difficult, I ran. I thought a new city, a new job, a new environment would solve my problems. What I didn't understand what that was, whenever I went, my addiction came with me. See the pattern there? When we arrived in Sioux Falls, things initially seemed to be going quite well. I found a job. Before I even got here, I had a job. We stayed with my sister for a short time, then we found our own place. For the first time in a while, I felt stable. But inside, I was still carrying my old habits and my old wounds. For about a year, I stayed away from drugs, mostly because I didn't know where to get them. In some ways, that protected me. But then one day, I was outside talking with the neighbor, just chatting it up, and it turned out he knew exactly where to find drugs. He introduced me to a drug called methamphetamine. I tried it years earlier, but this time it was different. It was cheap and it was available. Before long, it had completely had a hold of me. I began using more and more. The addiction grew faster than anything I have ever experienced in my life. Around the same time, Jen had to travel back to Florida for a custody case that she had with her ex-husband involving her son, Josh. So she left Josh with me while she handled things down in Florida. When she left, I made the most terrible decision that I ever made. And that decision would cost serious consequences. I convinced myself that since she was gone for a while, this would be a perfect opportunity for me to use, and nobody would know about it. That's the kind of thing addiction does. It creates false things in your life. I look back at it and that's still what it gets me. It tells you that you can control things. It tells you that no one will ever find out. It tells you there will be no consequences. There are always consequences. One night after using, I began to experiencing severe pain from a kidney stone attack. The pain was so intense that I couldn't even make it to my vehicle to drive myself to the hospital. So I called 911. When the ambulance arrived, they noticed signs of my drug use and asked me questions. And for the first time in a long time, I told them the truth. I admitted that I was using. As a result, the authorities became involved, and Josh was removed from my care. The moment I realized what had happened, I felt sick. I knew I had failed, and I had hurt people that I loved. I knew that my addiction was affecting more than just me. When Jen returned, she was understandably hurt, angry, and very mad. I couldn't blame her. My choices have created this situation again. Because of everything that followed, I couldn't stay at the house for a period of time and ended up staying at the Bishop Dudley house. At that point, my addiction was getting worse by the day. I didn't care about much of anything except for getting high. I didn't even realize what I've done to her by her losing her kid for 2 weeks. The addiction had become my master and was controlling every area of my life. And yet, even in the middle of all this darkness, God was still beginning to put people in my path. Someone invited me to celebrate recovery at Celebrate Church, so I started attending regularly. At first, I really didn't understand everything about Jesus or recovery, but I knew I needed to do something differently. I knew I couldn't keep living the way I was living. Week after week, I kept coming back. I joined a step study. I began learning about my addiction, my hurts, my habits, and my hang-ups. For the first time, I understood that addiction wasn't simply about drugs. There was a deeper issue underneath it all. There was pain, there was trauma, and there was was definitely shame. They were wounds from my childhood that I never addressed. I also met people who genuinely cared about me. And one of those people was a gentleman named Michael Freeman. Michael took the time to invest in me. He spoke truth into my life. He encouraged me and he challenged me. Most importantly, he believed that God would change me, even when I wasn't sure I believed it myself. The problem was that while I was learning all these things, I wasn't fully applying them. I was hearing the truth, I just wasn't living it, and I was struggling. Evidently, I became involved in the leadership at Celebrate Recovery. I gave lessons, made announcements, I led groups. I served wherever I could. From the outside, it looked like everything was going well. But behind the scenes, it was a totally different story. I was living a double life, and guilt became overwhelming. Finally, I came clean. I sat down with the ministry leader at the time and admitted that I was still using and needed to step away from leadership. That was one of the hardest decisions that I ever made in my life. Conversation was very tough. After stepping down, I joined another step study. This time I dug deeper. This time I became willing to look at the root cause of my addiction. For years I thought drugs were the problem. What I discovered, that drug was just the solution. They were how I coped for years of pain, abuse, fear, and unsolved trauma. As difficult as the realization was, it was also becoming the beginning of real healing. For the first time I started focusing only on the behavior and started allowing God to deal with the wound underneath. But I still had a long way to go. Even after everything I had been through, I wasn't fully surrendered. I was trying to do recovery, but I was having a hard time gaining traction. Every time it seemed like I made progress, I would eventually relapse. I wanted freedom, but I was still trying to do things my way instead of God's way. One day, Jen had enough. I came home, and she was gone. For the first time in my life, I truly felt broken. I sat there alone, realizing that the woman who had stood by me through most of all the hardest things in my life reached her limit. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, so I did what I always done. I used. And this time, I used harder than ever. A week went by, and Jen called me and said she wanted to come home, but she didn't want to drive. She was in South Carolina. So we agreed that I would fly down and I would help bring her back to South Dakota. That was a Friday night, and I remember it quite clearly. I was at Celebrate Recovery over at Celebrate Church. I don't even remember what was going on. I just remember I was there. I really just wanted to prove to her that I was trying to make a change. But I had so much drugs in my pocket, it was unbelievable. So when I got home, I stayed up using. I didn't sleep. I wasn't thinking clearly. And certainly wasn't making rational decisions when I started heading to the airport the next morning. What I didn't realize was that I still had drug paraphernalia and methamphetamines in my pocket. When security discovered it, I knew my world was about to come crashing down on me. I remember sitting there waiting for the law enforcement, convinced that my life was over. I thought, this is it. I finally destroyed my life. And that moment of panic and fear, I made another terrible decision and consumed the drugs that were in my pocket. I had about an 8 ball in my pocket. The next thing I remember was waking up 3 days later in a hospital. Doctors have told me that I overdosed, and on my way to the hospital, my heart stopped for 7 minutes. For a period of time, they believed that I was lost. But God had other plans. Indeed, you're in it, right? Looking back, I believe God spared me and my life on that day. Not because I deserved it, and not because I earned it, but because His grace is greater than my failures. There is a verse that has become very meaningful in my life and through my recovery journey. It is Psalms 40:2-3. David writes, He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire. He set my feet on a rock and gave me a firm place to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a new hymn of praise for our God. When I read these words, I think about when my addiction had taken me, where I was in that pit. I wouldn't climb out of it on my own. Every time I tried to fix myself, I ended up right back where I started. But God reached down and pulled me out when I couldn't rescue myself. You would think that experience would have been enough to finally change me, but unfortunately, addiction doesn't work that way. Within a few months, I relapsed again and again. The cycle continued. Jen really didn't know what to do with me anymore. She loved me, but she couldn't control me. Neither could anyone else. I spent nights on the streets using, but would come home exhausted, broke, and ashamed. I was physically alive, but spiritually and emotionally dead. And one day, this was about a year and a half ago, my body finally gave out on me. I was home using when I started experiencing severe pains and some significant bleeding. At first I ignored it, because that's what addiction teaches you to do. It teaches you to be ignorant to the warning signs, ignorant to the consequences, ignorant to the reality. The pain kept getting worse. I finally told Jen that something was seriously wrong, and she took me to the hospital. The pain was unbearable. Doctors began running tests, and they determined what happened. At that point, I became so frustrated and desperate for relief that I even threatened to leave and go find my own way to deal with the pain. As I was preparing to leave, I ripped out the IV walking out the door. The doctors contacted me and urged me to come back immediately. I even said to them, you told me the hours for the test. They said, well, the tests came back, and they revealed something very serious. My colon had ruptured. The doctors explained that without emergency surgery, my life was in deep danger. And for once, I listened. I agreed to the surgery, and within a short time, I was on the operating table. When I woke up from recovery, there was Jen sitting beside my bed. She had every reason in the world to walk away from me forever, but there she was. That night, after she went home, I found myself alone. I was deep in my thoughts. For the first time in a very long time, I stopped making excuses. I stopped blaming others. I stopped trying to negotiate with God. I simply surrendered. Lying in the hospital bed, I prayed and asked God to take my addiction from me because I couldn't beat it on my own, was, and that my life had become unmanageable. I didn't need religion or more willpower. I needed Jesus. Something changed that night. I really didn't fully explain it, but I know God met me in that hospital room. And since that day, I haven't picked up another drug or taken another drink. Remember that. That doesn't mean that my journey has been easy. It doesn't mean that the temptations never come. It certainly doesn't mean my life suddenly became perfect. What it does mean is that today, I know where to turn when those thoughts come. Today I know that drugs, alcohol, and running are not the answer. Jesus is the answer. Today my life looks a lot different. I continue to attend Celebrate Recoveries meetings throughout town. I work with principles, I work with steps, I connect to healthy people, and I definitely pursue a deeper relationship with Jesus. And I continue to rely on God's grace one day at a time. I've learned that recovery isn't about perfection. It's about surrender and honesty. It's about allowing God to transform us from the inside out. If you are here tonight and you are struggling, I want you to hear this. No matter how many times you relapse, how much the shame is carrying you, or how broken your life may feel, there is hope. God is not finished with you yet. He can save someone like me. He can definitely save someone like you. The same God who met me in the hospital room is here tonight. The same God who carried me through my addictions, my abuse, my traumas, my failures, is still in the business of changing lives. Celebrate Recovery help find healing. The steps help me find honesty. And the people in recovery help me find support. Will help me support. But Jesus is the one and only one who changed me. Today I'm grateful for every